That works.
Hi, I'm Mark Shepherd. I'm acupuncturist in Donington, Tudor, West Sussex. So what we've been doing recently is bringing some interviews to you, and we're doing talking to some acupuncturists from around the world. So today we have John Kukor, who's coming to us from Orlando in Florida. So John, how are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. And so what is good to hear about, I've been finding, is how people actually got to be doing what they're doing. And so tell me, how was it for you?
Definitely. Yeah, I love the question. So it's kind of been kind of a 180, if you will, for me. So
Uh-huh.
what I mean about that is I was raised on not going to divulge my age, but back then it was not really at the forefront, and I got a lot of strange looks and questions in my childhood. But my mother took me to a chiropractic doctor as young as I was told 6 months old. I was getting chiropractic care. And I continued getting that throughout adolescence for my entire upbringing, essentially, and acupuncture. I saw several different homeopathic doctors regularly, and that I was, like I said, kind of my whole upbringing. I didn't receive a lot of traditional medications, vaccines, those sorts of things. We had gardening, organic gardens growing up, a lot of very natural emphasis. And then when I branched out on my own, I kind of just caught on to standard American diet, which some people may have heard of, and just kind of started living that lifestyle of sleep deprivation and processed foods and just things of convenience without really thinking about those choices. And I actually went into construction management for a period after my undergraduate degree. And I was doing that. And one day I was in my construction trailer and I received a phone call from one of my mother's coworkers. And took me by shock that she was essentially comatose and she was in the emergency room. So after a couple more phone calls, I was able to get in contact with the MD at the emergency department, and she was living just outside of Washington, D.C. at that point. So I got in touch with the doctor and said, hey, just, give it to me straight. I'm in Florida. I'm several hours away by plane. So do I need to be there? And he said, yeah, you should probably be here. So about 4 hours later, I found myself in the intensive care unit. And like I said, she was in a coma. And I was in my late 20s at that point and was the decision maker with not a lot of formal medical training at that point in my life. So the doctor basically relayed information to me and said, look, so she's got full-blown metastatic cancer. I had no idea what that meant at that point in my life. And she was 65, and they basically said, look, even if we can do surgery, so she had a tumor on the upper part of her spine, which was compressing her brainstem. And so basically it was, inhibiting the signal there, and therefore she was in the coma. So they said, even if we can get in here, we can have a successful surgery with how much the cancer has metastasized, which I now know basically is a fancy word for saying it had spread.
Mm-hmm.
They the prognosis was very grim, and they didn't think even with a successful surgery she'd live more than a month beyond that. So I figured, well, the doctors are basically telling me I shouldn't even have the surgery done. Am I crazy to think I should? So luckily, I have some very good friends that I bounced the idea off of at I don't know, at that point it might have been midnight, 1 in the morning. They're like, no, of course, have it. So we went through with the surgery, and luckily that was the right idea. And I would say it was a while ago, so I think maybe 3-4 weeks later, she woke up from the coma, and she, of course, had no idea everything that had transpired in that period. So she came to, and she had an amazing group of colleagues. She was working for a defense contractor in the DC area, and she was doing administrative work. Um, a lot of these people were either former military or had been in a government position. And many of them left the office during the day or immediately after work came over to console her and talk with her, because I guess she had just been such a joy for them to work with that they really missed her presence at the office. So that was kind of an awesome experience, just see all these people coming out of the woodwork that I'd never even met before. And so her spirits were really high when she came back. And so anyway, fast forward, I ended up leaving care. Or I guess, let me not fast forward. So I had managed her care there for about a month in the hospital. And again, at that point in my life, I really had no formal medical education, but it really gave me a good taste for an experience that a patient would go through, because I essentially had to be there as the advocate, because, you know, when you're sick, you're not really able to make the decisions, even if you have any idea what the doctors are coming in to tell you, because they're waking you up at 3 a.m. They're in, they're out, they're rotations, what they're doing, nurses are coming in, all these different people are coming in and out. You don't know what's going on. So me being there to really put together what the plan is, what was going on, what procedure we were doing now, really was eye-opening for me. And after we'd gone through that and they released her at the hospital, they basically said, okay, well, she's going home. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the plan after that? There's no plan after that. It was up for me to figure out what happens. They said, well, we can put her in a rehab facility for a few days. And I don't know what the situation is as far as those for the UK, but have you ever been in any sort of rehab facility, or you know anything about that?
I think it all kind of depends. I mean, when people have a big operation here, generally there's a plan for them when they come out. It's just trying to coordinate with the local doctor and how visitors are coming in. But it was all totally down to you.
Yeah, essentially that was my understanding. I mean, I was left questioning people. Okay, so you know the surgery was successful, but she had been bedridden for about a month. So there's a lot of atrophy in the muscles after that period. Her gait was still impacted by the tumor that was back there on her brain stem. And she had some minor neurological issues afterwards, and let alone the toll the cancer had taken on her, because it had been going on for a while, and she just had denied the fact that it was happening. She told me she was sleeping in her car through her lunch break every day. She wasn't eating up into months before it. She was eating very limited. So it'd been going on for quite a while, and she was somewhat decimated, you know? And so, yeah, so I opted for this rehab facility, and I dropped her off there. And, you know, the facility, as soon as I walked in, it smelled of urine. She was sharing a room with someone else who, the poor soul, I don't know what they'd been through, but all of their appendages had been amputated, and the person was not speaking, which, you know, God bless their soul, but I didn't see it as a really revitalizing place for her to be. I dropped her off there, and I want to say within 3 or 4 hours, I called her and said, I can't leave you at this place overnight even. So I went back, and you know, going back to the people that I had spoke about, her coworkers, it was amazing. So I couldn't stay there any longer. My employer needed me back. I left her at her house, but her next door neighbor was a nurse. She was coming over, checking on her regularly, and she was the one that had originally found her non-responsive and had called 911 to get the paramedics to come take her to the hospital. So she had that next door neighbor. She had all these coworkers that would come by twice a day, a different person in the morning, different person at night, just outside. This went on for several weeks. There was a sign-up sheet that people would come by and do that. And then eventually, I moved her. I had a house with several rooms. I moved her into my house, and I took care of her for about 7, 8 months. So even though the Western physician had originally predicted she had most of the month,
Hmm.
um, you know, physicians, nobody knows. No, nobody's God or whatever higher power you look to. They don't have all of the answers. They don't have a crystal ball. So she ended up living for quite a period afterwards. And up until the last quite a few great moments. And through that period, we just had some time to talk. And I didn't really like where my career was going and the people that I was working with. I worked with some very nice people, but many of the people I saw were men in their late 50s, 60s who were very unhappy with their lives and were angry all the time. And I didn't want to become one of those people, essentially. So we talked about chiropractic and acupuncture as two things that we had a lot of experience with. And I had a friend in each profession. And that is the short, not so short story of kind of how I came to this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, and how long was it for your training? How long does it take?
So the school that I went to, most of the programs in the U.S., it is my understanding that they are essentially four-year programs, which compose of an undergraduate degree and a master's degree kind of jammed together.
Mm-hmm.
The school that I went to, it was a three-year program, and we went almost year round. We had some breaks, but they weren't really
Mm-hmm.
very long.
Mm-hmm.
So my program was essentially 3 years, but it was like a four-year program kind of smashed into three. That makes
Yeah,
sense?
yeah. It's a
Yeah.
big investment, isn't it? It's a big investment.
Oh yeah, it very much is. And I think I don't know how it is for you on the other side of the pond, but for many of us here in the US, I don't think there's a lot of understanding of how much investment there is as far as the educational
Hmm.
purpose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, having graduated and as you're going through it, I think when you talk to some people as they're learning different things as they go through, they start feeling like they want to specialize in certain areas, or they absolutely don't want to specialize. I mean, how was that for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember, and I think it rings even more true to me today. So, as early as my first semester, one of my favorite instructors, he said something to the extent that what we learn in school was just this much, just a little tidbit. And I'm thinking, we've got all this time here. How can we learn just this little bit? And when I graduated school, left with the impression, oh, I'm prepared to treat everything. I have this vast knowledge. And, I did learn a fair amount in school. However, when I got out into the real world and started like really seeing more complex cases and just how various treatments worked and didn't work, it really was eye-opening. And, even in school, we had to see, I think we got like 250 to 300 patient visits that we saw while we were in the student.
Oh, that's a lot.
It's not like you walk patients. Yeah, it was, a decent amount, but that still is just a tidbit
Mm, mm, mm,
in regards to what you're going to see in the real world. So the first clinic that I work at was a pretty cool experience. About half of our patient base, we worked with Western MDs and nurse practitioners and physician assistants. So I worked hand in hand with them and also got that Western aspect for them. And many times they would see a patient immediately afterwards. I simply pain, but there were other cases that were introduced to. So that was very interesting. So I had that, and then I had no idea of all the different things that really we could work with as an acupuncturist. So talking about the specialty aspect that you mentioned, I've through the value of Facebook and social media, which honestly, probably, I don't know about you, but for me, really the reason I still am on them, colleagues. in the sharing of knowledge
Hmm.
and introduction of different types of treatments and different things that we have the abilities to do. So through that, I've kind of gone. It's almost like, I don't know if you had these books growing up, Choose Your Own Adventure. Did you ever see anything like that? Or
That one,
well,
but
so they were kind of
sure,
cool.
similar. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of a fun thing that I liked growing up. So you would get these stories, and if you chose option A, it would say
Oh
like
yes, absolutely.
turn to
Yeah,
page,
yeah,
yeah, turn to page 37,
yeah, yeah.
and then you do that. And I feel like that's kind of been my acupuncture career.
Mm.
That I start off thinking, oh yeah, I've got all the tools, and then I'm actually picking up more and more tools on the way. So one training that I'm kind of ongoing right now, which the whole COVID situation and traveling has put on hold, is
Hmm.
there's an acupuncturist in New York City named Clayton Shu, and he practiced for 4 years at a hospital in China. He's Chinese American. He practiced there in a Tianjin, Tianjin. I totally drawing a blank, but
Hmm.
the hospital there specializes in a lot of neurological conditions.
Ah, okay.
And there is a movie out, a documentary about an American weightlifter who suddenly suffered a stroke in his 30s. That it's called 9,000 Needles, I
Yeah, yeah,
believe.
yeah. Yeah, I've seen
Before?
that. Yeah.
Okay. So that hospital was featured in this movie. And the acupuncturist that Clayton Shu trained under is like the head acupuncturist at the hospital.
Hmm.
And so many of these specific styles that Clayton learned, Dr. Shu learned from him there, he's implementing these trainings. And there are some really cool effects. I mean, some of them are just some of the typical acupuncture points, like spleen 6 that
Hmm.
we've all learned about in school.
Hmm.
But there's very specific ways of needling and manipulation, which is very different than I'm sure what 99.9% of us would encountered in school. And very specific reasons why we're going to use these points in the manipulating this manner to get a certain effect.
Hmm.
And they have very strong effects, and I've seen them with patients. So some of the things that we can use this for are like stroke. Um, I did a class with him and another acupuncturist here in the US. Her name's Isla Wolf. That she trained at a place actually very close to me in Florida that's world renowned called the Carrick Institute. And Dr. Carrick has created these programs for traumatic brain injuries, which are very big in pretty much any sport that has contact. Like,
Hmm.
we call it soccer
Yep.
internationally. I'm sure
Yep.
you would refer to it as football.
Uh-huh.
I love the sport. It's growing here in the U.S. Obviously,
Uh-huh.
it's huge internationally, and I've
Hmm.
worked with several of the players that we had. We have a team here in Orlando. I've
Hmm.
worked with several of the players and talked to them. And
Hmm.
Americans don't realize, I'm sure you do as a European, that a lot of contact in the sport
Hmm.
and head injuries can become a very big issue.
Yeah, particularly with headering the ball. There's quite a lot of debate at the
Traditionally,
moment about should or shouldn't children be headering the football because of the impact and the
yeah,
damage that it causes,
yeah,
particularly
exactly.
long term.
Like a lot of it. And then through some of the modern diagnostics like MRIs and X-rays and CT scans, they may not actually be showing everything that's really going on there.
Mm-hmm.
So utilizing some different diagnostic techniques, there's some visual cues, which, for example, like Clayton has pointed out to me multiple times, patients around like C6, C7, so like your lower cervical spine,
Hmm.
called a Dowager's hump. And many times that is a sign of systemic inflammation, that the cerebral spinal fluid, you're suffering some sort of buildup there.
Hmm.
So a lot of times if patients have suffered some sort of trauma, they
Hmm.
will have this Dowager's hump build up back there, and people
Hmm.
are completely unaware of it. And it's not something that even many Western physicians are going to be looking for unless they've had some extensive neurological
mm,
training.
mm,
So they can guide us to different types of treatments.
yeah.
And just, the tremendous systemic effect that acupuncture can have
Hmm.
can really help patients with the rehabilitation
Yeah.
of something like that. Now, everybody's going to respond differently, like with any
Hmm.
acupuncture treatment, but
Hmm.
that's something for me that I think is really awesome because so
Yeah.
many people aren't aware, because once you suffer a brain injury, that's your new norm, and you don't realize, you were over here before and now you're over here because you're living it. You don't know until
Yes.
somebody sits you down,
Yeah.
analyzes you, and evaluates you, what you're through and what you have the ability to get back to.
Mm,
So that's one thing I think is really cool. As far as athletics have been a big part of my life personally. So when I got into acupuncture, that was something I really wanted
mm,
to incorporate, acupuncture in athletics.
mhm.
So there's I guess New York City just kind of apparently draws to me, even though I'm nowhere near it. There's an acupuncturist in New York City named Richard Hazel that
Yes. Uh-huh.
you might know him. He does a lot of trainings over in Europe, actually.
Yeah, certainly heard of him and watch a lot of his things on Facebook.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
yeah.
he actually has one going on right now that I was planning on going. But he's doing like these weekly meetings, which are really cool. As a lot of practitioners are not at their normal volume right now because of COVID.
Yeah.
But the first, I'd say, like orthopedic acupuncture class I ever took was with Richard Hazel. And it really opened my eyes because in my schooling, we had nothing like that. And some of the schools in the US do offer more orthopedic type classes. And I didn't even really know of that as a specialty. So taking that class with him just kind of like opened a whole door for me of
Mm,
all sorts of different things that I could do. And it ended up leading me to, in the US, we have we have dry needling, which you guys probably have over there.
mm,
And there's a lot of what I've seen. I've been following it a lot through social media, and there's a lot of different types of training. So I did research, and there's a group here called MyoPain Seminars, which is run by a physical therapist who studied and knew an MD, Janet Travell, who Travell and Simon Simmons, I always say wrong.
mhm.
Simons, I think. I have to think about it. David Simons. He was he was in, I believe, the Air Force. He was a medical doctor. But him and Janet Travell put together these huge volumes of basically myofascial pain,
Mm,
how adhesions in them created all these referral patterns, and just a lot of really in-depth knowledge as far as that, and just kind of really forwarded pain and the understanding of it, if you
mm.
will. So
Yeah.
the CEO president, Jan Dummerholt is his name, of MyoPain. I actually trained directly with him because I was curious. A lot of acupuncturists in the U.S.
Mhm,
It's left the term dry needling has left a really bad taste in their mouth.
mhm,
I wanted to know that I'd received the training and to be able to evaluate as well. Okay, what's this training about? A lot of people say it's extremely dangerous. Interesting experience because I want to say for me personally, I went into it with all this negativity that I'd heard from acupuncturists. Um, Not so much. I had a few friends who had done the training through MyoPain previously, and they spoke very highly of it. So I did have that. But just so many acupuncturists had bad mouth dry needling to not me specifically, but on different groups and everything. So I went in there thinking that, well, I have to say, at least the way that his group teaches it, I could not have been more impressed with the
mhm,
emphasis they placed on safety.
mhm.
And the class that I took was actually out of the US, it was in Ecuador. So most of the people in the class did not speak English, which was kind of a benefit for me because it was taught in English and immediately translated into Spanish, which I do speak. but I got a lot of one-on-one time with Jan
Hmm.
Dummerhalt, and we just kind of talked about a lot of it. And in the end, him and the physical therapists that have trained with him in his company, just like us, they want to help people. They want people to feel better. And I learned some of the greatest needling technique, at least for orthopedic acupuncture, that I've experienced. Like a lot of the technique I learned in that class, I learned from a physical therapist. It really paid dividends and was very eye opening. So,
Is it,
um,
it's fascinating the fact that there is, when people think about acupuncture, they think about one thing, but they say that acupuncture is an umbrella term, and there's so much out there. And like you were going back to earlier on, you're talking about spleen 6, which is a point which is just about 4 fingers width up from the inside of your ankle, and just but different people using the same thing but for very different reasons. And people just see it as just putting a needle in, but there's so much more you can do. And I've done some trigger point work myself because I didn't want to feel like I was missing out. And it's kind of made me want to look into it deeper because some of the people you see doing these videos and the needling they do is such interesting work. And it's just being able to open your mind, isn't it?
yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, like, you touched on it there many times, you know, and I'm sure you encounter this too, but you'll to somebody that you know, maybe has a hurt elbow or so and say, you know, hey, have you tried acupuncture? Oh, I tried that once and it didn't work. Or,
Mm,
you know, I don't like that. Or, you know, oh yeah, I go to this person. Well, you know, there's so many different ways to do acupuncture, and there's different treatment styles. There's practitioners are going to have different ways of evaluating things. So, you know, my advice too, like if a practitioner doesn't mean, you know, the couple treatments they did are
mm,
going to be the ideal thing for you potentially.
no,
There might be a different way to have it done. And especially if you just got one treatment, sometimes even depending upon the condition, if you've had something for 5 years, you can't expect one treatment to be like,
no.
boom, here's my Harry Potter wand, and you know everything works for you. Like
Yeah,
it might take 4, 5, 6 treatments until it actually starts to even kick in.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting what you touched on there.
Yeah, and that point as well. I mean, everybody would like the Harry Potter wand, and within the acupuncture world, there are so many
Right.
stories
Yeah.
of people borrowing it for the day, and such fantastic results coming out with one treatment. And it can happen. We've all had it, but most of the time, you know, you got to look at that sliding scale, haven't you? And
Yeah.
you know, it's a body, and the body needs to take on change. And
Absolutely.
it's fascinating. So where exactly is your clinic? Where are you practicing from?
So I'm in the Orlando, Florida area. I
Hmm.
actually I share my time between two the east side of town. So there's an area called Winter Park.
Hmm.
So it's just east of downtown Orlando. And then also I have another office on the west side of town. And I'm in that office with some wonderful physical therapists actually who are
Hmm.
very holistic minded. And they also physical therapy, just like acupuncture, their
Hmm.
take on physical therapy is remarkably unique in my opinion, as opposed to some other physical therapy that I've seen. They're very forward thinking and really think what they bring to the table is phenomenal.
Oh, amazing. It's so nice to have colleagues to work alongside, isn't it? Like sometimes we find ourselves practicing quite on our own, and other times it's so nice to have other people around and to share ideas.
Totally. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Well, I really appreciate your time today. So thank you for sharing that with us. And one thing I tend to pop on the end of these is if someone's out there and they're thinking about, you know, do I do acupuncture? Do I go and retrain? What would your words be to them? What would you say?
Well, I'd say, you know, seeking somebody, definitely, you know, ask them what they feel they're good treating at, because they might not be the person for you. There are things that somebody wants to do acupuncture, they'll come to me and I'll be like, you know what, I know this person down the street, they'd be a better fit for you. So first of all, that
Hmm.
there are some acupuncturists they'll just take anyone.
Hmm.
And you know, I don't want to badmouth anyone. Good for them, but in my opinion. There are people that, like we touched on specialty, that can really do a great job
Hmm.
with certain things as opposed to just focusing on the whole gamut. So I would
Mm.
say look into the practitioner, see what sort of things they do,
Mm.
see realistically what they can do for you, what your expectations are.
Uh-huh.
And also, as a patient, make sure that you're really vested in getting a treatment because treatment, possible that this one time fantastic result can happen for you. However, generally, it does take multiple treatments. Even if we get you feeling a lot better after the first time, there's still just the nature of, say, you're coming for pain, the nature of soft tissue healing.
Mm.
It takes
Time.
repetition. So, I mean, I would recommend those sorts of things, honestly.
And what about if someone was actually thinking about training in acupuncture? Or if
So
they
you think
if someone was actually thinking about training, do I become an acupuncturist? What would your thoughts be then?
So I would say definitely look at schools. Look at what the schools offer. There's one school in the U.S. that's very highly regarded called well, they've changed the name. I think of it as Pacific College of Oriental Medicine, but they just recently rebranded. I don't remember what their new term is, but they formerly were going by PCOM for short,
Hmm.
Pacific College of Oriental Medicine. They have a branch in San Diego, a branch in Chicago, and then one in New York City, as far as I know. I believe
Impressive.
there's three.
Mhm.
So they're all over the U.S. So I looked at the one in San Diego in California, and I almost transferred there. So one of the really cool things that they offer at that location, at least when I looked at there, is they had, I think, five different externship programs, which they had a relationship with a local hospital, a sports medicine facility, I believe. They also had an opportunity to work, I want to say it was like work directly with HIV/AIDS patients. I think they had another one that was maybe like a hospice, but like that alone could lead you almost into a specialty. And opportunity with something like that is priceless, in my opinion. We had our student clinic, but that was just whoever we got to come in. That wasn't
Yeah.
like a very specialized thing. And having an opportunity like that, I think is really awesome. If you're into orthopedics and you think that might be something you like, there are programs. Like it seems like several of the schools in New York State really have specialties in that, and that could really lay a good foundation for you, something like that. And then you sort of specialty more postgraduate. Um, I think things like that are very interesting, but definitely research the school, see what's about, see if what it offers really lines up with what you're looking to get out of it.
Hmm. That's magic. Thank you so much for that. It's been fascinating listening to how you got there, and the roads you've taken, and looking at the neurological side, and working with the soccer teams as well. So no, it's been great. So thank you very much for your time, John.
Yeah,
And
thank you for having me. So
I'll be putting details of
Orlando
your
Alternative Health.
thank
What's
you.
that?
I'll be putting details of your practice underneath the
Oh,
video for
okay,
you.
awesome. Sorry.
Okay, that's brilliant. Oh, nice to
Thanks so
see you.
much for having me on. I had a great time.
And you. All the best. Bye bye now.
Thank you.